The blockade is instituted in January of 2006 because that was the era when the United States was involved in what was called democracy promotion. And one of its test cases was that George Bush, to the extent that he was cognizant of what he was saying, George Bush, which would, by the way, put him way ahead of Biden and our current president, to the extent that George Bush was cognizant of what he was saying, he called for the Palestinians to hold elections. Now, Hamas, the Islamic movement, it did not want to participate in those elections. They said that these elections are part of what was called back then the Oslo process, namely the process that began in 1993, in September, I think, 13th, 1993, the process which ended up co-opting a portion of the Palestinian leadership who, to put it simply, switched sides and started to work for the Israelis and the Americans. And Hamas viewed these elections as part of what it called the Oslo process. It didn't want to participate. But then it was cajoled and coaxed into participating. And they ran on a very non-ideological platform. They ran on a very simple platform: reform. The Palestinian Authority, the beneficiaries of Oslo, the Palestinians who switched sides, they were hopelessly corrupt and incompetent. So Hamas ran on a very simple platform. It wasn't about the jihad. It wasn't about wanting to destroy Israel. No, it was just reform. And surprising to they themselves, they won. But it wasn't only a surprise to them, and it wasn't only a surprise to the Palestinian Authority. It was a surprise to the Americans and the Israelis. Later on, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, I believe, she famously said, "We made a big mistake by letting them win the election." That's not how democracy is supposed to work. You're supposed to vote for who we want, not who you want. So, the same principle in New York, in my own hometown. The billionaire class gave $30 million to Mr. Cuomo. Mr. Mamdani raised $1 million. So he's not supposed to win. That's not how it works in democracy. In democracy, we decide and we determine with our money who wins. And it didn't turn out that way in Gaza. So immediately, as Hamas came into office, first Israel, then the US, and then the EU, they slapped these brutal sanctions on Gaza. Even though Israel claimed that in 2005 it had withdrawn from Gaza, that was clearly untrue for a very simple reason. What Israel did was not withdraw from Gaza. What Israel did was it took the keys to the jail cells, threw it to those incarcerated in Gaza. That's true. And then they withdrew. They withdrew to the perimeter of Gaza. They were no longer in sight. And then they slammed shut the prison gate. So what Israel described, and you will often hear it described, as Israel having withdrawn from Gaza, what they did was withdraw from the inside of Gaza and then seal it hermetically shut. And that's really not hyperbole. Israel determined who went in, who went out. Israel determined what went in, what went out. Beginning in 2008, I believe, I think it's 2008, Israel imposes